As I said, I mentioned my daughter Crystal multiple times. She graduated from the University of Utah with a bachelor's in computer science 4 years ago. Has worked for a med tech company, running out for the last 4 years. I bring her in precisely because she's gone through the transition that most of you are about to go through, which is going from being a full-time CS undergrad student to a full-time employee. She's still recent enough. She and I actually were talking earlier, and she says, I'm trying to remember if I actually remember the sort of the shock of ending up in industry. But I'll let her talk and then open up to whatever questions you have for her. She will be quite honest about things, but she will be politic, but she is still employed. And with that, Crystal, I'll turn the time over to you. Give you the chair here.
Hi guys. All right. So I guess brief introduction. I went to U of U and just basically went through the traditional four-year path. I actually started interviewing and ended up I started interviewing in the fall of my senior semester, or senior year, and got hired on January of my senior semester, so I kind of juggled full-time student and full-time employment, and then transitioned to full-time software dev once I graduated. The company I work for does med tech. They do reminders, appointments, scheduling, doctor-patient communication, and they're a fairly small company. They've been around for a little under 20 years. I do full stack development, so I do SQL backend, Java server side, and a variety of front-end frameworks. I've also done a little bit of like NoSQL, some Cassandra database. But that's what I've been doing for about 4 years. I have worked for a variety of teams. I've done a lot of work on legacy software. Being a company that's almost 20 years old, they have a good code base of stuff that's been around for upwards of 20 years. A lot of it that's just basically we're still reliant on. It's very fragile and very old, but we got to keep it up and running. I don't know if any of you guys know Struts or have worked with it. Okay, I see a few nods. Yeah, our primary platform base is in Struts. So there's the challenges that come along with basically having to hold your nose and keep something up and running when you would rather just rip it all out and start from scratch, but you can't always do that. I've also worked on a couple of brand new projects, one of which was a conversation tool that allows doctors and patients to basically communicate using a doctor's landline. So they can send text messages that come from the doctor's landline, and then patients can text back, and they can have conversations that way. They can text about reminders, they can send pictures, they can send privileged patient information that way. So I have good experience of starting something from scratch. I've also had an interesting time with working with a company that's gone from sort of small, scrappy startup, even though they were 15 years old at the time, atmosphere, where it was definitely kind of, they would call them cowboy deployments. Like, we would do agile deployment, and you would just sort of test your own stuff and merge it into dev and try not to break anything. And if you broke stuff, you would bring in donuts. They've put a lot more procedures in place. We have a lot more kind of guidelines around reviews and around how you actually get stuff in and how it works with testing with QA and acceptance criteria, and having a lot more structure around that. I've also seen the exit of our CTO that founded the company, who was very much like a startup guy, and as soon as it became a lot more corporate and they wanted to expand, he left and they brought in a new CTO team that has been working for the past few years to try and turn our company into microservices. So we're going from the giant monolithic platform that does everything basically on a couple of servers to breaking everything down to microservices using GGC. So we have Go backend, Google Cloud Platform, GCP, and Mithril frontend. And so I've seen the division of the team. I'm on the team that's basically still working with the monolith, and we also have this new team that's basically trying to recreate everything that we've built over the past close to 20 years into microservices, and do that within a couple of years. So that's kind of a really long introduction. I don't know if you guys have any questions for me at this point. I kind of want to see what you guys are curious about now that it's been 4 years and I can still vaguely remember being new, but I have some experience at this point. So do a lot of you, are you interviewing with companies? Do you have jobs? Do you have ideas of where you want to work? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Who already has a job? Awesome. Are a lot of you guys in Utah, or are you moving out of state?
Utah.
It's kind of crazy, right? Yeah, I was going to say, when I was talking to my dad about, I was dead set on leaving Utah, of course, but this place is a black hole. There's just, it's absolutely amazing the kinds of companies you can work for, and in terms of salary and benefits, it's really competitive, if not a better situation than a lot of other states. I have known people that have moved out to California, out to Seattle. I have a friend that works for USAA out in Dallas, and the financial situation I'm in here and have been in Utah for the past 4 years has been better than they're in, because it's still affordable, but the salary and everything you get here is competitive with other states, but you're not spending, $2,000 a month mortgage to live in a shack. So, do you guys have any questions about like what it's like transitioning? I mean, have any of you worked? Yeah.
So I am finding myself in a similar situation to where you were in, where I graduate this December, but I just accepted a full-time position.
Okay.
How was working full-time but finishing up your schooling?
I cried a lot. It was definitely difficult. I made sure from the outset when I negotiated, like they wanted me to start day one, and they said, we want you to work as much as you can. I set expectations to let them know I still have a capstone project, I still have classes I have to finish up. So I didn't take on any large projects. I made sure, obviously, to prioritize schoolwork and sort of let them know, like, at this point, I'm still learning. I want to take on something that gives me an idea of like what your code base is like, what your projects are, or what your project structures are like. And I was pretty conservative on giving any delivery estimates. That was something that I thought was really important that I could have shot myself in the foot easily with, is if I think something's going to take me a week, I would tell them 3 weeks, which is, that's one of the most amazing things about once you get into industry is I was so used to in school, everything has a set due date and that is set in stone, and you fail if you don't get it done by then. But as soon as you get into, like when I was working with my company, they would say, when do you think you're going to have it done? I would say 4 weeks, 2 months, and they would say, okay. And then if I didn't hit that deadline, I just said it was going to take more time, and that was okay. I mean, you definitely, like, you want to try and give reasonable estimates, and you still want to make sure you're working hard, but you have the freedom to make sure you're doing it right. And if you need more time for something, like, that was one of the weirdest things to get used to. And also not having to tell anybody when I was going for lunch. Like, I think for the first couple of months, I would always tell my manager when I was going out for lunch and make sure she knew exactly when I was going to get back. And one of the great things is I have an absolutely incredible manager that I work for who's, this is one of the things that makes the biggest difference in whether or not you are going to enjoy wherever you end up working, is having a sense of whether or not you have a good manager that's directly over you. I've been incredibly lucky with finding somebody who enjoys what she does. She knows it's basically, she has to keep the team on track in terms of what we need to be delivering, what the board and the executives are expecting, what kind of products our customers want, when they want them, but also make sure that she's not burning us out. So she's like, that makes basically a life or death difference in terms of any company you work for. As I've worked for the other experience I've had is with an internship, and with that internship it was basically at a company that was kind of on a death march, and our managers were just basically like, we don't care if it works or if it has bugs, just get it out, just give the customer something. And I think she actually had us clock in at 8 a.m. Like, we actually had to be there at 8 o'clock and show that we were there at 8 o'clock, and then we were there until exactly 5 o'clock, even if we had, whether or not we had work to do. And that was one of the most miserable summers I've ever had. And so it was a great contrast as far as like, my company has definitely been through a lot of interesting experiences, not all of them great, but I continue to want to work as hard as I can because my manager has been so great. And she was that way from the beginning. She sort of said like, I understand you're still in school, you still have schoolwork to prioritize, so she would make sure to give me smaller projects, she would give me longer timelines, she would make sure I had the resources to understand what I was supposed to be doing and where I needed help. She would make sure I had access to people that would help me. And it was definitely, it was difficult, but if you have a good manager, it makes it a lot easier. Have you started yet, or are you?
I start the 15th next
Okay.
week.
Okay. Is it a small company or larger, more corporate?
It's the church.
Okay. I actually don't really know anything about, I mean, is it more corporate or is it smaller companies?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's very corporate.
Okay. Okay. I mean, that's going to be an interesting experience. I would definitely, have you met with your managers? Have you met with your team?
Yeah, so it's the same team that I had an internship last year.
Oh, good.
So they brought
Okay.
me back, yeah.
Okay.
And an awesome manager, awesome
Okay.
team. I really was really hoping that I could come back, so this is really good.
Yeah, see, it's going to make it a lot easier if you're not going in like having absolutely no idea. If you're already sort of familiar with who you're working with and what you're working on, I think it would just sort of be, make sure they understand that schoolwork still comes first. You know, you got to graduate.
Yeah.
So, do you guys have any questions about like salary negotiations or expectations, or what it means to be like full stack versus microservice? Does anybody know the difference between them? Yeah.
I had a question regarding a salary negotiation. I already have a job, so I'm kind of past that point of accepting a position, but I did a lot of research and I just want to get your point of view on it. Like, how appropriate is it for your first job to negotiate, and and just for future reference, what do I need to keep in mind as I am going to negotiate in the future for raises, etc.?
I absolutely think this is something I learned the hard way because I made a mistake. When I started out my first job, or when I started out negotiating for being hired onto this company, I under-negotiated myself. They asked for a range, and I wish I'd listened to my dad and everybody else. Basically, the rule of thumb that I've seen is kind of have an approximate value of what entry-level software engineer, depending on the position and the skills you already have an idea of the range, and then I would make the bottom end of that range the bottom end of your negotiation. The top end, I would shoot for like a couple thousand above it, because the worst thing that can happen is they negotiate into the range you want to be in, and the best thing is they give you your top end. I had an offer already, and I cut my range short a couple thousand of where I knew my friend was getting paid, and they gave me my top end, but they would have given me my top end at a couple of thousand more. So I'm the one that under-negotiated myself. When it comes to negotiating in the future, this is something I worked very closely with my manager from the beginning. I wanted to know from her, basically, how could I set myself apart and what it takes to be a senior at their company. And I said that from, 3 months in, when I didn't even know, barely even know how to work with a Linux terminal. Because at that point, everything we've been doing was in a lot of Windows stuff. But I was like, I want to know what it takes to progress in this company. What are the expectations for the different levels of software engineer in your company? And she and I developed a plan for hitting the marks that we needed to in terms of spearheading my own project, helping other newer engineers as they were coming on, taking on larger projects. And when it came time for yearly review, she was really good about documenting a lot of the achievements I've made and a lot of the room for improvement, things that I could have done better. I also did too. I made very clear, I kept very clear track of what I thought I had succeeded in and what I thought I could have done better, but also what I had contributed to the company. And I was able to argue, these are the things that I think I bring, these are the things that make me a valued asset to your company. And it's very hard to, I still want to be humble. I still know I know nothing. I've felt that since day one, but also you have to be able to argue for what value you bring. And you have to be able to do that in terms of facts of this is what I've done all year, not this is what I did a month before, review time came up. It's really be cognizant of what they're looking for in the next level engineer. And then also, I would keep close track of what engineers in this area with your experience level, with your skill set, for me, it's full stack, so I've got some front end, some back end, some database, what those different skills are, what they're actually getting paid. I look at Glassdoor, I look at PayScale, I look at a couple of different sites and kind of get an aggregate. I found that at one point, I want to say it was 2 years ago, I was getting paid about 10,000. No, I was getting paid 8,000 less than the average of somebody in my experience level with my skill set. So I went to my manager about a month before review started. I said, this is the research I've done. This is what I think, just based on statistics, demographics of this area, this is what I should be getting paid. And also had backups of these are the things I've contributed. These are strong soft skills I have in terms of communication with my team and collaboration with other teams. Be able to argue why you contribute. And I made a very strong case for myself and ended up getting more than what I originally asked for. So it's be very, very good at documenting what you add to the company, and then also just keep track of what you've paid throughout this area, because it's going to keep going up, and it goes up really fast.
I'll throw in here, and I'm sure a lot of you know this, is that entry-level salaries tend to go up faster than salaries of people already employed.
Yes. Yeah.
In other words, if you join the company at X amount per year, in 2 or 3 years, you'll find that new entry-level people getting hired are actually getting paid more than what you're currently earning at that company, which is why the research is so important.
Yeah. And that is one of the things that, especially in, I know you've all heard my dad's story about when he first started. I think you had 4 jobs in 3 years. And, that's kind of the traditional rule of thumb, is the way that you get paid more is to switch jobs. And that does hold true from what I've seen from friends in the industry that have moved on to different companies, is you generally get a big salary bump when you switch to a different company, I have actually made sure that I've just basically said every year, like, I am willing to leave if I'm not getting paid enough. There's a lot that I love about where I work now, but if they're not paying me enough, then it's time to move on. And every year when I've gone in for reviews and salary negotiations, I know exactly what to expect for what I should be bumped up to, but I'm also very much prepared to leave if they don't get me there. Like, that's a big thing with, in terms of getting pay raises, you always have to be willing to say, like, if you don't give me what I think I'm worth, then it's time to move on. Because that's one of the ways they acknowledge how valuable you are, is by paying you what you're worth. So luckily, so far every year at this company, it's basically, they've exceeded expectations in terms of increases and making sure that I'm staying up with pay rates throughout the valley. So I've been lucky. It's a really good company to work for. Yeah.
When you went full-time, were you able to hit the ground running and start contributing immediately once you get the tech? Or was there a learning curve as you made the transition from just a college student to an actual software engineer?
Kind of both. I definitely, one of the things that I found was a really great way to hit the ground running was they started me on bug fixes. Because that's a way to just sort of dive in and be like, this little part, this thing isn't working, so go figure out what this thing is, and, you know, fix a small component. It's generally, you know, most of the fixes were just a couple of lines of code, but that really gives you an idea of how something is supposed to work and how to dig through to figure out what's going wrong. After a couple of bug fixes, they put me on a large project that ended up being a failure, but it was still a great learning experience. After I did a couple of bug fixes, they put me on Kill Switch, which was basically an administrative tool that in the past, when they had customers that cancel, they would literally go in and change their username to like the name plus cancel, and then change the password to some default canceled password, which is unbelievably insecure, unsecure, obviously. And they wouldn't turn off any of like the automated messaging stuff that would run at night. So there was still a whole bunch of wasted resources. So what they wanted me to do was go in and just basically turn off everything and change all of the defaults and change all of, not delete anything from the database, because for data consistency, we never delete anything, you just change it to a different state. But that was horribly difficult, especially considering how massive our platform is and how much personality it has in terms of like, you had lots of different hands touching it, not all of them terribly skilled over years. So sometimes things don't make sense and we have to figure out what they are actually trying to do and then fix it or figure out how to work with it. And that ended up being probably about a month's work, and then it just ended up getting scrapped because they found other issues that were uncovered in the work I was doing. So, but that was still, even a failed project, I ended up learning about facets of our platform that other people had not worked with in years. So they were still just sort of, they were built at some point and kind of forgotten, and a lot of different things that we were doing that people didn't know about until I found it. So it was still a valuable experience. And in terms of learning, like, I can hit the ground running faster now, but I'm still learning. I just recently started a project in January that was updating some of the roles and permissions for our enterprise accounts, which we have normal subscribers, which are just single account, single office managing their set of patients. Then you have enterprises, which are groups of offices managing groups of patients with an overarching structure. And everybody was afraid to touch it because somebody had kind of built it as an afterthought, so we had some enterprise support a few years ago, but it was kind of a hacky fix. But now we needed to add on to it and improve it, and I knew absolutely nothing about roles and security in Spring. So I had to learn all about the magic of like how roles are assigned, how they're passed to requests, and how to check permissions and everything and make sure you're doing it client side and server side. So I had to learn that and still basically deliver a massive project that the executives were expecting by the end of the quarter. So that's one thing I'm sure my dad has told you is you are never done learning, and you are never done feeling like you don't know what you're doing, and you're just sort of scrambling to figure out what something is and how to work with it. But it's kind of fun. That's kind of what I love about the job. So, in the back, and then you. Yeah.
What's it like to be a female in industry versus just a student?
This one's always kind of hard. I don't really notice, maybe I have just gotten lucky, but I've never really noticed being a female engineer. I've just kind of, I definitely felt more, this is always a hard one for me, because
I'm very lucky.
I don't know. I mean, when I'm a student, it's sort of, I definitely felt like my first couple of years, it was, the expectation is, I don't really know how to do anything and I need a lot of help because I'm brand new. But in terms of like being a woman in this industry, I haven't experienced outright discrimination. I just sort of, I make sure, I don't know. This one's always hard for me. I haven't really, if there has been any sort of discrimination or anything, I haven't noticed it. I think part of what really helps is I have an absolutely fantastic manager that has been an advocate in terms of making sure that like I get work of consequence, that I get experience, that I get learning opportunities, that I get opportunities to fail, and that if and when I do fail, it's because I didn't have enough time to do it, or I didn't have the proper tools to learn it in time. I've always just kind of felt like I'm just part of a team that's learning. I have worked with female engineers that have experienced some sexism, but I haven't experienced it myself. I did have one guy on our team who ended up getting fired because he was incompetent. So his name was Bob. Bob used to like to talk to all of the new engineers and tell us he had been coding in COBOL since before we were born. And I'm at least probably 10 years older than everyone in this room, so it's not like I'm young. But he still liked to say he'd been coding in COBOL since before we were born, he had more experience. None of us knew what we were doing, but he couldn't deliver a branch of code that built. Like, his stuff was just constantly broken, and if it wasn't broken, it was a never-ending series of if-else statements, which is horrifying for me. There was another female engineer that came in who was kind of a little bit more quiet and shy, but brilliant. And there were a couple of times where he got up in her face and kept saying, like, who are you? Surely you're not an engineer. Are you on the HR? Are you on HR or are you a program manager? And he made a couple of comments like that, and he did it one time when he was in the elevator with me and her, and I said something I don't really remember. There weren't any, I didn't swear, I didn't say anything. It was just sort of like, I don't understand why you don't know that she's part of the team. You know, like, what does she have to do to justify herself? There's definitely, like, there are some times where I have noticed women being treated differently or singled out. but I honestly, for me, it's just, I always make sure I'm working my hardest. I'm trying as hard as I can to learn and to do well at my job and to be careful and make sure I'm delivering quality code. Like I make sure what I build not only works, but makes things better. You know, it's if I see chances for improvement, I'm going to try and make things better along the way. And I really just feel like there are still examples, but the culture has changed a lot for the better. So, yeah.
Do you have any advice on taking the first job? A lot of the job positions seem like they have a very narrow, specific thing. Like this is a JavaScript developer, this is React developer.
Yeah.
It's just really hard and confusing to go from like my studies, have been really broad, and even my work is like web development and like desktop development. It seems really hard to take all that and just put it to one thing. And it kind of makes me scared to like just go to one thing. How mobile can I be to something else after I pick?
I'm really biased. I agree with you. I think finding something that is a narrow focus can kind of limit your future possibilities. But I don't know if this is, I've seen rumblings of the culture in engineering changing more towards focused, specialized development with microservices where you work on the front end of this piece, or you work on this microservice that does this thing, or you're the database person. And one of the things I feel has been absolutely beneficial to me is, as a full stack, I hated UI when I first started. I hated front-end development. Like, we did a database project in my class, and the front end looked like 90s HTML basic web page, because I couldn't design to save my life. I couldn't do CSS to save my life. But the demands of the full stack position that I've been in is I can't say like, okay, you go do that, worry about it. I have to build it, and I have to make it look as good as the designs that the product people have given me. Even to the point that like there was one where we had pixel, pixel by pixel, I had to make match up. And I feel like that has helped me become a better engineer overall, and has widened my skill set to the point that I can now say, like, if you want me to do front end stuff, I can do it. If you want me to do client side, or server side, I can do it. I can do full integration. I can build you database backend, front end, and make sure it all works, and do it quickly because I'm not waiting on anybody else. Like that's my thing about why I really enjoy, if you can find full stack, I think it just gives you more freedom, because if you want something, you're not waiting on somebody who hopefully has the same sense of urgency as you. If you want something built, you go build it. So, so like I said, I'm very biased. I don't know how much engineering as a whole is changing to more focused positions, or more, I don't know, more limited positions. I think if you can find something that's a little bit broader, it would be to your benefit, especially for your first job out of school, because that's one of the things when I first graduated, I hated UI, and I was like, I am the database and server-side person. That's all I want to do. And now, honestly, I absolutely love, like we worked with Vue Framework for some of the stuff that we built. I love it. And it took me years, to actually understand it enough to love it. But now I feel like if I needed to go to a focused front-end position, I could. Whereas before, when I was just graduating, I would never have known that I could be any good at it. So I do know there are some companies that are actually moving more towards full stack. I have a friend that works for ForcePoint in Salt Lake City. I think they do some like NSA pre-data stuff. She won't tell me exactly what. But they're moving away from focus positions and more towards full stack. So I'm hoping like it might be a trend in the industry that is not going to catch on and become the standard. That will go back to more like full stack stuff being available. So.
Questions? Let me ask this, what is your single biggest adjustment going from full-time student to full-time employee?
Probably one of the biggest was really having a comprehensive understanding and sense of responsibility for what I was delivering, because a lot of, in school, it's sort of, you have your set guidelines for this is what it is, this is what it's going to do, and you deliver it and then you move on. With the enterprise piece that I've been working on now, they had somewhat of an understanding of what it did, but they didn't know everything. They didn't know everything that that part of the platform did, or the consequences of some of what I was changing. So there's definitely a sense of ownership on, it's not one and done and I get to forget it. I delivered the first piece, which was adding roles and permissions, and then immediately after release, I had one of our enterprise account managers come and say, one of my clients is freaking out because we only have 2 roles. Everybody used to have admin level access. And then all of a sudden, somebody that was in the lower level role had access, or had their access cut off. And so that was a completely unexpected consequence that hadn't really been considered of, this is the way our clients are actually using something. So now I have to adapt and figure out how to keep our clients happy, keep something working, and like finish. There is no like done and I get to forget it and move on. I have to figure out how to make something work and take ownership over making it the best it can possibly be.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
So, at the end of the day, once you get home from work, are you just like tired of coding? Because I'm a person who enjoys side projects and personal things that keep me kind of motivated, that are apart from schoolwork. But I've never really worked full time, right? I just don't know if I should expect to just be tired of it and not be able to, or if that's something that I can still do. And I know it's different from person to person, so.
Oh, yeah. I definitely, at this point, I do have side projects that I enjoy working on. I've had a couple of people approach me about building some apps because I've got mobile experience. When I first graduated and it was just basically working 40 hours a week, there were times that I was just sitting down being like, what do I do with myself and all of this time that I now have? And within a couple months, I was filling it up with video games, with sleeping, with going to silks. I started taking up aerial stuff, which was super fun. I started weaving chainmail. Like it definitely, building software is part of it. And when I do it for fun, I can actually be like, this is my side project, there's no deadline for it, this is just sort of like playing around and teaching myself something new. Like, I am going to learn Swift for iOS development, even though I really don't want to, but I think it'll be good for me. I have found time and a desire. I actually built an app a couple of years ago that was just basically, this is such a being out of school thing. I wanted to track my disposable income because I now have money, which is nice. And I wanted to be able to track like what I was spending it on. And there wasn't really an app that I found that was an exact fit for what I was looking for. So I was like, I'll just build it. And I downloaded on Android Studios and just started kind of creating something. And I did a first version of it, and that ended up being super clunky and stupid. And I built another version. But I definitely had a desire to be like, I want to build this thing because I see a use for it. And even after spending all day coding, I still love the puzzle solving and the building aspect of development. Like I think that's like kind of, I don't know why everybody goes into this industry, but for me personally, it's just the sense of like kind of being a detective, being an archaeologist, and being a builder and a puzzle solver. And you have the freedom, like you do it for your job and you get paid, and that's awesome. You also have the freedom to do it for yourself. Like if you see something you want built, you go build it. So I definitely, you'll find ways to fill up your time, but if you love development, then you'll still have a desire to do it outside of work, I think.
Why don't you talk briefly about some of the flex work policies that you have at your employer, working from home and so on?
Oh, yeah, that was actually, so one of the things, every company is kind of different, but this is some of the perks that you guys might want to look for that are aside from just health insurance coverage or bonuses or salary. I have an incredibly flexible work from home policy. Basically, from day one when I started at my company, I can work from home at least 2 days a week. And I have a ton of flexibility in terms of like, if I need to go get my car oil changed, or if I need to, if I just want to, you know, go do something during the day. There's a ton of flexibility around like, you just let people know where you are, and then you can kind of go do whatever you want. But there's not this rigorous, like I have to be at work at 8 and I have to be done at 5, which has been an incredible benefit in terms of work-life balance. I've seen people that have worked for companies, and the last company I worked for my internship, where it was you clock in at 8, you go to lunch for an hour, and then you're done at 5, no matter how much or how little work you have to do, and that's exhausting. You know, it's just sort of when you're at the office when you don't need to be, or for me, like when I work from home, I'm generally more productive because I don't have meetings and I don't have coworkers that are kind of chattering around me or people that are asking me questions. So that's definitely like, these are the kinds of things you want to look for in a company, is that sort of flexibility, because I think it can be hugely beneficial. I've also had, I also got really lucky with my company. I was in a car accident last October, and they basically, this is another sign of a really good manager. It was a pretty horrific, it was a bad car accident, and I couldn't leave my house for about a month, and she let me work from home for a month. She let me like work from home at my own pace. I still delivered code, I still got stuff done, I still did reviews and contributed, but I didn't have to worry about taking PTO, taking sick leave, because I could still contribute, I just couldn't walk. You know, I can still use my fingers, but that was an incredible thing, because I didn't have to worry about losing my job, losing my position, but I still got to work and contribute. So.
Any other questions? Thank you, Crystal. You can see why I'm proud of her. Yeah, it's nice to have another generation geek in the family.